been, I think, our big success in the last couple of years has been partnerships. So we're now partnering the National Trust at Hatfield Forest and delivering their environmental education. And we're also working at something called Spain's Hall Estate, which is the first beaver reintroduction in Essex. So we're delivering their beaver programs, and we're delivering our programs on their land. So in partnership. So I think it's that being a small fish in a big pond, but actually making friends with lots of other fish and sort of, having bigger impact because we're serving them, but they're serving us, and it's got a lovely balance to it.
Hello and welcome to On the Same Landing Page. This year, to coincide with our mission to unlock 2 million in Google Ads grants for charities, we're focusing on issues affecting non-profit organisations across the UK. As always, I'm joined by my co-host Astra Newton, Head of Advertising. Hello, Astra.
Hello.
And we're joined by Joe Roberts, the CEO of Wilderness Foundation. Now, Wilderness Foundation focus on the effects of the wilderness on developing youth leadership. And this involves building leadership based on environmental awareness, ethics, developing positive well-being and mental health in young people who are vulnerable or at risk. Welcome to the episode, Joe. Nice to have you on.
Oh, well, thank you for having me. It's wonderful to talk to you.
Now, Joe, you're also from Chelmsford. I noticed as I came across your profile, we share the same neck of the woods. But originally, can you tell me about the origins of this charity, of Wilderness Foundation, how it came to be, and also your role within it?
So the Wilderness Foundation was actually founded in 1976. It followed on from an organization in South Africa called the Wilderness Leadership School, which was founded by an inspirational conservationist called Dr. Ian Player, who was very famous for saving the white rhino from extinction. I think when he got involved, there were 200 white rhino left in South Africa, massive poaching and hunting. And Ian was the one who started the whole rehabilitation of rhino by bringing them to Whipsnade Zoo and across the world for breeding programs. But they used to do rhino capture on horseback with the first ever designed anesthetizing drug gun. So quite a rich history. And he was known as Modolo in Zulu, which meant the knee, because he'd damaged his knee very badly as a child and always walked with a limp and a stick through the wilderness. So he founded this movement, which was around taking people in deep immersions into the wild. By going into wildness, sleeping around a campfire without tents under the stars, close to nature and close to big animals, he found that people went through a transformational change in their relationship, not just to themselves, to each other, but to the natural world. And he talked about the fact that this work would help people then feel so passionately engaged and connected that they would want to do something to protect it. So that was the origins of the organization, and started taking young Black and white South Africans together on wilderness trails to build a common humanity. That was during the apartheid years, so very transformational entrepreneurial work. And he then sort of had some really sort of amazing people who started to follow his work in the early days, such as the Duke of Wellington and the Aspinalls, etc., who started to see what happened when you went into the wild. And he then founded the UK Wilderness Trust at that point. And the idea was to try and get people out to Africa on these transformational journeys. And wow. It was a very interesting start. Not a lot of people would be dashing out to South Africa to sleep on the ground under the stars. But it sort of became a movement, and quite a philosophical movement, because he was a strong Jungian. He spoke incredibly eloquently about the spiritual value of wilderness and how that filled kind of a missing link for many people to have a sense of belonging to something bigger than themselves. So that's where we started. And then I got involved in 98, having read his book called Shadow and Soul. I'd known him as a child and a young person. And then arranged to meet with the Wilderness Trust here in the UK in 1998 when I moved from Luxembourg, and said I wanted to help, I wanted to do more. And so got very involved with then founding a project called Mbewu, which had already started in South Africa, but I wanted to raise money to get more young South African youth who grew up in townships, who were excluded from wilderness and nature, and to see whether I could raise money to get those young people out into the wild. And so that's how I first got involved, you know, as a young white South African myself, who'd had a very privileged engagement with the natural world. My dad was a conservationist and a philanthropist and a doctor. There were so many others in my community who had been deprived of that. So it was a very driven, wanting to put something back moment.
Wow. So that is, what a rich history that has got. It's a huge amount of work that you guys have done and people that you've changed the lives of. How does it manifest itself nowadays then? And how has that changed? So in terms of the different services you offer outside of perhaps the core offering of getting people into the wilderness, is there any other parts of or any other projects that you guys work on that are influenced by that original incentive?
Yes. So once I started to get my teeth into it here, I started to also question why we're only sending people to South Africa. I didn't want to lose that work because it was the kind of spiritual home of our work. So we continued to send groups and people out to South Africa. And I worked very hard on schools and cadet groups and driving those leadership programs that went out to Africa and built in a community volunteering element to it as well. But I started to question why we're not taking more people in the UK into our own wild spaces here. We don't have pure wilderness, but we have spaces like Scotland and Wales, Dartmoor, you know, Peak District. There were places of great beauty, which weren't wilderness, but they were wild space, and started to say, how did we do more to take people into our own backyard? And I used to sort of talk a lot about, you know, you could find wilderness in your nettle patch if it was wild enough and you were able to settle into it. So, you know, started to then grow programs. So Mbewu was running in South Africa, but we started to do some work on a project called Turnaround, which again came from a South African stimulus, working with very vulnerable youth, many of them coming through police custody or coming from the edge of youth offending, and taking those young people with us on a journey through wilderness with mentoring and a lot of personal growth and therapy to help them turn their lives around. And that project's been running since 2007, but we really started to research how could wilderness work on behavior change and mental health from about the early 2000s. So it's been 3 years just researching what is it that makes this work really make a difference. And Turnaround is still running. We've just been interviewing the next group. A group go out tomorrow to go canoeing Loch Lomond for a week and wild camping. And we see an 85% of those young people going into further education or employment, showing significant changes in their self-esteem and mood and confidence and employability. So the project still lives on. Mbewu now runs in Scotland under the name of Troon, which means brave. I know I keep harking on Braveheart, but it does mean brave in Gaelic. And again, taking people into the wild to heal their mental health. And then we're running about 8 or 9 other major programs to do with domestic violence called Blossom, Brave Futures, which is again mental health, working with young people with special education needs who really seem to settle in a wild space, where there's a kind of a settling down, a grounding, particularly if you come from somebody with neurodiverse needs. You're able to kind of work within a natural setting. ADHD kids flourish in this setting, and so do adults. So do I. I think I'm a real ADHD adult, and I settle in the wild. So, you know, we've created and run a whole series of programs that continue year after year. What needs within them changing, but they run very successfully.
How do they all get managed? Are they like managed individually, those projects, or is there someone that looks after a group of them? Like, it must be quite difficult to look at so many different areas that can affect someone's life and manage them well.
So I think from a modeling point of view, how we kind of brought brought out something that is kind of manageable was that we have project leaders. So somebody will be responsible for their project. And they're given the kind of autonomy and the space to be in charge of that project. Obviously, they work with supervision and they come into group work within the organization. They're part of the team, but they have overall responsibility for their program. I've managed to hold on to involvement in one in particular, which is the turnaround project, which I founded in 2007. So I kind of cling on by my little fragile fingertips to that one because I'm so passionate about getting out and seeing the work in action. Otherwise, I can't talk about it myself. But other than that, we have amazing project heads who look after those programs.
What are the skill set that are required for that kind of role for project management? Maybe that's the best way of terming it, but to manage projects like that successfully, what do you need to have in you as a person?
Commitment, reliability, really, really important, and a real passion for why you're doing the work. I mean, I think this is work that is heart-driven rather than head-driven. So you've got to have somebody who is willing to get up, do the work, and do whatever it takes to make that work. And not just be thinking a 9-to-5 kind of mentality. It's a kind of much bigger process, but they also need to be extremely compassionate. We work with incredibly vulnerable people who often dysfunctional and can be incredibly challenging in terms of not turning up for things, or, you know, and we're always trying to have somebody who look for the backstory in life. You know, what is that backstory? Why did somebody not turn up? It's not just because they're disinterested. It's because they haven't quite got themselves regulated to get up in the morning, or they don't have money for the bus, or they can't return a call because they don't have credit. So you've got to kind of have a really broad pair of shoulders to handle the work. And you've also got to be able to recognize your own capacity, and then to be able to be vulnerable enough to say, I think I'm going to need a couple of days to just get over this, or I need help, or can I take therapy or coaching? Or I think we're looking for humility and vulnerability at the same time, if that makes sense. And then I think the commitment and reliability is absolutely critical, because if you need to be there all the time to hold that up. But a lot of our project managers manage their volunteers as well. So they need to be able to be really good managers in their own right too, because your volunteers are coming for a driver that's around a need that they're fulfilling because they want to make a difference, or they want to have purpose, or they want to belong. So you have to be able to run what you're doing, work with your group, and at the same time look after your volunteer force. So we have got overall management of all of that, but you're it for that.
I guess as well, you've got sort of like two schools of people. They almost have to wear two hats. So the people who are there to help with the therapy side of things, but also you are the Wilderness Foundation, and you do like a lot of like rewilding and environmental conservation as well, don't you? Can you just talk a little bit about how you fit together the therapy side of things with the more ecological side of things, the environment? An interesting link.
Sure. So I feel like we're like a walking Venn diagram, basically. So we've got that sweet spot in the middle. And I think that's what's made our charity feel very special. And it's sort of been, we had Judge Business School involved for a while, and they were saying what made us unique was the sweet spot between the people work and the environmental work. And so we've got a huge environmental driver about, you know, we need a healthy environment for its own sake. But we also need a healthy environment for our human well-being. And I get really upset when we talk about using nature or making use of ecosystem services, which is a very popular term at the moment, because actually nature deserves its own respect and rights, in my opinion. I'm a great purist in this. And I think that we need to not just be looking after people, we need to look after nature. And so our work, the sweet spot is, if you came here for your therapeutic engagement, you would learn leave no trace ethics. You'd learn about, you know, biodiversity. You'd learn around systems thinking. And if you came here as a child or a young person for environmental education, and we've got 8,000 participants coming through, you'd also then be learning how to count on your fingers to look after your well-being and help your stress level, and how to breathe, and the importance of nature on feeling better and finding the language about feeling better and talking about emotions. So, we're trying to drive both sides in whichever piece of work we do, because we see them as directly interconnected and equally important. So I am very passionate about it. And I'm a great advocate for, as I said, the integrity of nature for itself, but also how important it is for healing people at the same time.
Yeah.
There's a huge amount of impact, right? And I mean, the numbers you just gave us there in terms of like the thousand, you say 8,000 just through that initiative?
Through all of our programs. So we've grown. I mean, I think maybe 5 years ago, we were about 3,000 beneficiaries. This last year, we've hit 8,000 beneficiaries. So it's an enormous kind of growth. And I think also, I know we're looking at the sort of charitable business side of what we do. But I was just looking at our figures before 2019, our restricted programs, or the ones that are direct delivery programs, had a turnover. Gosh, what did I write down? Well, we've grown 128%. We had a turnover of 183K before in 2019, and those programs have risen to 400K in 2022. So we've had 128% growth since before COVID.
Wow.
So that's, so that's driving these numbers. That's driving this kind of growth spurt. So it's really interesting when you analyze it and you look down on it, you see, wow, that's interesting.
When you take a second to count what the work is actually doing, it's quite, must be quite a good, it gives you a lot back. I mean, in terms of all of that impressive growth, what do you think has been the biggest driver, or maybe the most successful project? I'm sure that there's success in loads of them, but what's been the key success that you've had in the last year or so?
Okay, so putting my Venn diagram back in place. So the environmental education, I mean, we have got an inspirational team of environmental educators. I mean, they run their little unit, and they are just extraordinary human beings, because they bubbly and engaging and full of interest and full of knowledge, but they do it in such an amazing way. So I think that's an enormous bonus. We've been lucky to be something called Green Influencers, which was funded by the Ernest Cook Trust. Terry's been driving a whole lot of youth ambassador programs for young people and environment. But the big thing, I think, our big success in the last couple of years has been partnerships. So we're now partnering the National Trust at Hatfield Forest and delivering their environmental education. And we're also working at something called Spain's Hall Estate, which is the first beaver reintroduction in Essex. So we're delivering their beaver programs, and we're delivering our programs on their land. So in partnership. So I think it's that being a small fish in a big pond, but actually making friends with lots of other fish, and sort of, having bigger impact, because we're serving them, but they're serving us, and it's got a lovely balance to it. So that's on the environmental side. And then on the social side, I would say I've always sort of tried to think of ourselves as entrepreneurial. So we've responded to social need. During COVID, we developed a whole range of services that came out of a hat with a little pink rabbit in the middle, because it was about how did we support those services who were working in crisis, the police, the NHS. We were offering free therapy to those service deliverers to say, how can we help you? Then we ran online counseling, which we said we'd never do. We said we would disconnect to reconnect. But during COVID, we offered our services to as many people as we could in a way that they could grab help. And then we started to look at crises within the society, anxiety, social anxiety, domestic violence. And now we've kind of been an adaptive charity to say, how do we help those people who are coming out of probably one of the biggest the biggest crisis faced globally? And how do we position ourselves that nature suddenly became a place people could find refuge in, but it's tied into our therapy services. And we've just been able to make lemonade from lemons in the nicest possible way. But I think the domestic violence work has been incredibly powerful over these last couple of years, because domestic violence in the UK rose 40% during COVID. Now that we've got, a cost of living crisis, that drives families to a brink where all these kind of underlying issues bubble out. So how are we positioning ourselves to support more people that way? So, I think that kind of work makes me feel like we try really hard to be on the right page for people and on the right page for nature. So that's, I think the projects really are turnaround out there, blossom, they're all serving a need for people. And then the rewilding and the education is serving a need for nature.
It's interesting. It sounds like you've had to have a lot of difficult conversations about what it is you stand for and what it is you're having to react to with regards to how things are changing so much. I mean, to be working at an outdoor kind of therapy and wilderness focused charity during lockdown is difficult. I'm imagining it was like, what's left? Like, where do you go with what you can do as a service and to help people? But I'm also interested to know, how do you get those partnerships to work? Are you knocking on doors? Are you going to events? How do you find people to partner with, and that's been so successful over the last few years?
Well, I think we've built a really solid reputation, even though we're a medium-sized charity. We're small to medium. We're not a big hitter, but I think we've built a very solid reputation. We're very focused on quality, and we're very focused on research and monitoring and evaluation. So I think we've been very rigorous in being able to deliver quality, and I fight tooth and nail with our team to maintain that. But I believe that I believe in bluebirds of happiness. It sounds like a very unbusiness-like approach to the world, but good things happen to us, and I don't quite know how else to explain it. So good things happen to us. So it's word of mouth. It's somebody who's found something on the internet about you, who wants to come and talk to you about something. It seems to be interpersonal and digital and luck a lot of the time, which is not a business proposition. But I think if you build a good product, it has a magnetic effect for others who want to be part of that journey. So I think partnerships need careful management. I think they need nurturing, but they need a very rigorous approach to really good contracts, really difficult conversations up front, making sure that you've looked at how you will manage any conflict, how you will manage anything that might not work. So we've got amazing relationships with our partners in terms of monthly meetings, checking in, how's everything going? It needs excellent communication on a regular basis and trust.
But that's interesting. There is just an element of, like, if you do enough of the good things well, you will get the rewards. And we have to find this with marketing. It's like, which part of our marketing is doing the work? It's like, okay, we don't really know, so you just have to do as many of the bits you think will do the right thing, and just eventually it will play out. You can't just do the one thing that will work and get you those results. And similarly, how do you get people to your website? Like, where do most of the people come from? Is it through campaigns, or do you run any like kind of digital campaigns as well that get people to like find out about you, or is there something else?
So I mean, I've got an amazing marketing officer, Claire Martin. So she's very good on the digital side. So is Terry, our educational side. I think I'm a little bit old-fashioned about this, even though I've gone on digital training workshops. If I don't do things all the time, I forget. So I'll go to training and then I don't do anything for a month, and then I kind of go, oopsie, I can't quite remember which button to press. So I do have to claim that I am a bit digitally challenged, which is not something I should be proud of, and I'm not proud of it. I try hard, but I've got a team of people who are really good. So Claire, for example, we've been doing funding. We get funding from kind of matched funding opportunities like the Big Give, which is all digitally run. So she will be using social media and different kinds of campaign tools, matched in with a partner who's also matching that digital output. We've learned quite hard that you want to try and ask other people to tag you in so you can benefit and piggyback with their their campaigns. During COVID, we were incredibly blessed. Another kind of opportunity came up as a kind of joint campaign, which we called Vitamin N, which had people from National Trust, the Wildlife Trust, different mental health charities, Jordan Cereal, etc., etc. And that was a major campaign to take nature to people who were locked in flats and unable to get out. And that was a big learning curve, because being a small, medium charity, we could piggyback on larger organizations who had a much bigger reach. But Claire's grown our digital impact from around, I think we had about probably max 2,000 people on it about 3 years ago, and we're now touching 10,000. So we are growing through that collaborative approach, and we're really good at saying we'll promote you. So you know, you can't ask people to do things that you're not prepared to do yourself. So that's how we work with all of our clients that come through in terms of the services we run. We will never ask you to climb that tree. We'll never ask you to walk through that mud. We're going to walk through it just the same as you. So in our relationships and our business side of the charity, we believe that we will honor what we ask you. We will do exactly the same. And I think that keeps a respectful, virtuous cycle that does help each other.
Yeah, there's loads. I mean, those numbers are great, from 2,000 to 10,000 in terms of like that growth is immense. There's so many different routes to go through, and it is just about making sure you pay back people, because you know it can be a small industry as well, and you'll meet them along the way. Do you focus a lot on the stories when you're kind of doing your marketing and getting people into understanding the mission and who you're helping? How do you manage to kind of leverage those stories?
I think that it's got to be stories. You know, no matter how clever we think we are digitally and technologically, you know, we are still human beings, and we still are relationship driven. It's in our DNA. And I think that compassion and helping people find a connection comes through storytelling. And I think that there's a technique within digital and technological communications where you've got to work really hard to keep the human emotional side engaged, and case studies are the best way to do that. Certainly from my experience, case studies where you can talk about somebody who's benefited, or you can show what's happened in a wildlife story, will always touch the heartstrings of people. And I think we need that. You know, we're driven by a very rational world, but actually as a species we're very emotional. And we mustn't forget that we're made up of all of these elements, not just one. So huge case studies. I would recommend that all the time.
Yeah, I think that's a really good summary of what a lot of the charities we've spoken to have had. It's like absolutely bringing out those stories and making sure you can talk about them at length, because that's what people really vibe with. You can say what you're trying to do, but what you've actually done and talk about real people, that's what tends to make the difference. I think that's a really good kind of finishing point for segment one, where we get a chance to understand a little bit more about your work and your charity. You've been brilliant. You've got some great. I love the analogies. They're my favourite thing there, because we've got a section at the end called strategy analogy, which it sounds like you'll be great at. The second part of this is the what we're calling hook, line, and stinker. So we've got 3 statistics that I'm going to give you, and you guys are going to have to tell me which one is the fake one, the slightly exaggerated or underrepresented one. So I'm going to bring this up on screen, and I'm going to read out these statistics, and these will always all be on theme as well. Okay, let me share my screen.
What happens if I fail, Jason, in my test?
Yeah, to be honest, I think actually the scores, not to put the pressure on, but the scores have been pretty good so far. Most people get honest.
Don't say that. I get very panicky. I'm too much of a perfectionist. Okay, right.
I'm going in blind as well, Joe. So it's all good.
Yeah. So let's see. I haven't seen these yet. I've checked them only for the text, but I've tried not to read them, so that I'll try and play along as well.
Right.
Okay. So the first one is children spend 1.6 hours a day outside on average, or is it that children spend 63% less time outdoors than their parents, oops, sorry, I've taken you the wrong place, than their parents did at their age. So just to repeat that, children spend 63% less time outdoors than their parents did at their age. Or is it that the place in the UK where children spend the most time outdoors is London? Which of those is the fake fact?
Fake. Ooh,
Golly, I think the London one is fake.
yeah, I
But it depends
think
on
London.
outdoors. You could be walking to school, so that would count as outdoors, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
I
Tricky
feel like
one.
1.6 hours a day. Oh yes, I suppose children go out for breaks at lunch and stuff,
Yeah.
don't they? Which probably forms part of that.
I think
Yeah,
60
I think London.
I think 63% time outdoors than their parents is correct. But also the 1.6 hours a day outside on average could be correct as well. There's not a lot of time people spend outside. And so the first two I think are true. That's why London is my big one. But then, if you walk to school, that's it counts as being out. But what is outdoors? Is it pounding a pavement, or is it playing in the garden or going to the woods? Tricky one.
I would tend to agree. The second one looks the most likely to be true. This one seems low, but I wouldn't be too surprised by it. Like that is probably the state that we're in at the moment. And this is the UK, obviously, so it rains a lot. Yeah, I reckon I think I'd go with number 3 as the fake fact too, and it was. So I think we all got a point. All got a point. That is astonishing though. 1.6 hours on average. Like, that isn't long, is it, at all?
Yeah.
I would be interested to know actually if that includes lockdown figures, which would influence it quite a lot.
Yeah, and actually what's interesting is if you compared that with Swedish or Scandinavian children, where the climate is actually much harsher, you would find a very different statistic of children spending time outdoors. It'd be really interesting comparison.
Yeah, definitely.
Anyway, sorry. Right.
The second section is, so 2/5 of parents say technology is the main reason children play indoors. Or Manchester is the place where children have the highest screen time, 2.8 hours a day. Or 41% of children have been told to stop playing outdoors by their parent or neighbours for being too loud.
Oh.
Well, I think it's really tricky. I have no idea about Manchester.
Yeah, I can't. Why would we? Why would more people go on screens?
I suppose it's always quite rainy up north compared to down south, so perhaps there's not a lot of playing out time available. That would be my logical answer. I don't think it's anything to do with the readiness availability of screens.
I mean, I'm a bit taken aback at 41% of children have been told to stop playing outside, because most parents can't wait for their children to go and do something and keep.
Yeah, I agree.
Way.
Got the sound of my mum ringing in my ears telling me to get outside and play.
Yeah, I would think the 41% of children playing outside, but I'll be very upset if that's actually true. But I'd like to be delusional and purist and think that that's the one that's not true, but I don't know. Astra?
Yeah, I agree. I've got to say I agree with you on that one, Joe. I think number 1, technology is probably the main reason people play indoors. I think the only reason I played outside was because there wasn't much technology. Otherwise, I might have had a different childhood. And then, yeah, I'm sticking with my theory of Manchester being grey and miserable. So green time is the saviour. So I agree, 41%.
You could maybe even have 4/5 parents saying technology is the main reason for children to play.
That's true. Yeah, it could be.
That's what I think. I think it's going to be more people blaming technology for the reason that children will stay indoors. So I think top one is false because it's more.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you're going with the bottom one, and actually.
Yeah, I'm going to go with the bottom one, Tim. Stick with mine.
You know, I'm sitting on a fence. Okay.
Oh, we all lose. We all lost.
Oh, no. Okay.
Okay. So London is the place where where children have the highest screen time, not Manchester.
Okay.
And it is 2.8 hours a day. That's interesting. Okay, so let's find out then. Children under 13 who frequently play outside also report good mental health. But that just makes sense. I can't see that would be false.
Joe's praying that one's the true one.
Yeah. Only 5% of children had access to outdoor learning in 2016. Interesting. And then the last one on this section is children who grew up with access to outdoor spaces do better in a standardized test. They're all pretty difficult, because I'd say the middle one for me, but I don't know. What do you think? What does outdoor learning class as well? That's the interesting
Well,
thing.
I think that I would go for the middle one. I think it might be higher than that. It might be a higher statistic percentage.
Yeah.
I think 5% is. Oh, hang on, let me get this right. So I definitely think children who play outside may have improved mental health, but I can't evidence that, because I do lots of research into this. Children who grew up with access to outdoor spaces to better in standardized tests, I would think would be yes. Only 5% of children had access to outdoor learning.
Unless it means like forest schools and such.
Because we're also talking 2016, so we're thinking now quite a long time ago. And they had cut a whole lot of outdoor education. All those outdoor learning centres in Birmingham, for example, were closed down. They didn't get funding. So I think, I'm not sure whether the first one might be wrong. Also had good mental health. I don't know, they're quite...
Yeah, I was thinking perhaps the first one might be fake, just because I think if you asked any child under 13 how they were feeling about being outside, they'd say whatever you wanted to hear so that they could continue to play outside. That's my logic, but children are fickle.
Okay, so you're going first to the
I'm
first one,
go first, yeah.
And Joe, you said the first one as well.
I think the first one. I think the first one.
I'm going to go with the second one.
Okay.
Hey, I got
it. Well,
that's surprising. So the top one does surprise me though, because you make a good point. Like, do people, every child under 13 who frequently play outside also report good mental health? No,
I mean there must be many neglected children who are outdoors. Not you know, why would they have great mental health if they're not being nurtured indoors as well? So I don't know, I'm not sure. But well done, Jason, you win.
Yeah, you win.
It is suspicious because I've got the answers here, but I promise you that I didn't cheat that. And that's I'll let you introduce segment 3, Astra.
That was fun. Okay, I'd love to put that through the staff team. That would be really fun.
Yeah, give them a go.
Yeah.
So segment 3 is, as we've already touched on, is strategy analogy. So I'll pull up a random word generator and we have to come up with some kind of analogy that links back to the stuff that we've been talking about today. So the random word is comfortable.
So we've got to come up with an analogy in our work. Just explain it to me a bit more, sorry.
Yeah, so using the word comfortable, try and come up with an analogy for the stuff we've been talking about today. So it can be something around non-profits, it can be something to do with wilderness specifically, digital efforts, anything we might have touched on. It's quite a difficult one, comfortable.
I think I'd like to start I very rarely start with these because I find these really difficult, but there was something that you raised earlier, Joe, about how you started with such a fantastic mission, which had a really simple and easy to understand reason for being in terms of getting young people outside and the attachment they have with nature. And it would have been easy just to stay comfortable with delivering that because it works and it provides value, but you didn't. You took that and applied it in so many different areas with different projects, and I think that is where you can find value and be able to help in such a better way when you take yourself into uncomfortable areas and you've dealt with uncomfortable times and situations and had to have probably uncomfortable discussions about, is that really us? Is that what we stand for? Well, yes, when the time comes, that is what we have to do, because that's where people are right now. They're not out. We can't take people out. So here's what we've got to offer. So I think comfortable as a theme is important in the sense that you shouldn't be comfortable. You should always try and look for ways in which you can apply what you do in uncomfortable ways. It
Well, no,
didn't really summarize as well as I thought, but
no, I think you've nailed it, because I think, you know, we talk about the impact of wilderness immersion as being out of your comfort zone. And if you're not going to stretch yourself, you know, we do some work around, you know, panic stretch zones, you know, where is the zone? And if we just stay in comfort, we never grow. So we do a lot of work, you know, metaphorically about stretch zones, comfort zones, panic zones. But actually in running an organization, I never want to be comfortable, because if I get too comfortable, I've learned through hard experience. The minute I think things are going brilliantly, and you think you can sit back for a second, the next wave is going to suddenly come across the ocean and hit you. So I think we need to stay a little bit on the edge, not in panic, but in stretch, and that's being out of your comfort zone. So never be too comfortable. If little mantra. Yeah.
Yeah, I think all I can do is expand on what you two have already said, in that initially you want to get people into the wilderness, which is out of their comfort zone, but also you kind of want them to get more comfortable in nature than, you know, necessarily being at home and not being with people or in nature. So I'm just gonna, kind of piggybacking yours there, guys, but that's all I've got.
Well, fantastic. Look, that was really good to catch up with you, Joe. I've learned a lot about Wilderness Foundation, and I've learned a lot about you and the work that you guys do. As always, we leave a little bit of space here just to allow the guests to kind of talk about something that they would like to bring some attention to, or a particular project you're running, or could be a particular something that needs donating money to. So here is the chance to speak to our audience. Take it away.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we're living in interesting times, as we all know. I think that we need to, as an organization, I think one of our big challenges is to kind of grow, but not grow so fast that we lose our quality. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges that any organization or business faces. So, you know, while we can look so great at the growth of our delivery programs and what we're doing, it comes at a big consequence on staff in terms of, you know, energy, and you've got to watch burnout, and also the fact that our work is work that deals with a lot of traumatized people. So, you know, I've actually sat at my desk once and burst into tears reading a referral form, you know, and gone home with a really heavy heart. So we all need to be humble in asking for help. But I think that one of the challenges with growth is, how do we protect what we've got while we actually grow, and make sure that we've kind of thought through that risk management side of things. So I talked to someone the other day and they went, oh, risk, you know, let's not talk about risk. But actually, we need to be very measured. We need to be excited and creative and entrepreneurial, but we've also got to stay grounded and to think, okay, that sounds fantastic, but what is the risk to that? And I'm very lucky, because I am the kind of, oh, let's do that. That's fantastic. And if it was left to me, I would take on, I mean, I take on too much anyway, because it's my nature, because I'm so excited about life. But I've got some very good team members who, the more risk averse team members who go, actually, that's not, thank you very much for coming up with that great idea, but let's think of the consequences. So I'm a firm believer in, you know, many minds make good work, not just many hands. And it's kind of, you need to rely on each other and use each other's skill sets and use each other's strengths to kind of come out the other end with the best product. So, you know, while we're growing, while the world is crazy, while we're having to be entrepreneurial, while we want to be quick thinking and reflexive, we have to stay grounded. And our work is about being grounded. It is about keeping our feet on the ground and being practical and thinking it through. So I don't know if that's of any value to anybody else, but I think just to kind of, in our work, we try and stay balanced between nature and people. I think we're trying to be entrepreneurial and creative while we stay grounded. And I think it's just continually trying to seek balance is the way forward.
Wow, that was
a lovely
fantastic
sentiment to end on.
Yeah, fantastic ending. I really can't top that. I think it's been really, really good to have you on, Joe, and we'll include links to your website and some of the projects in the show notes as well. Yeah. Thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you. Well, I do put you in the bluebird of happiness flying through the window crowd. So I think we probably have to get people like Blue Peter badges, but our little Bluebird of Happiness badges. So thank you for inviting me on.
Oh,
Awesome.
no problem.
Take care.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye.